John, whenever you're ready to start the meeting, we're ready on the back side of things.
Okay, great. I think I am for sure ready.
All right.
You want to do the roll?
Sure thing.
All right.
All right.
All right. Do you have to do it verbally or can you do it off of the attendee list?
I think I'll go ahead and do it verbally. That it just works well on this side. So Bruce Bender. Doesn't look like Bruce is here yet. Maria Chestnut.
Present.
Dwight Easton.
I'm here.
Don Freer.
Still here, yes.
Peter Walker Kelleher.
Here.
Hank Trotter.
Here.
Nick Kaufman. I'm just getting an email from him, so he must be on his way. John Newman. John Newman? Okay, so did I miss anyone? All right, so it looks like everyone is present with the exception of Bruce and John, and we have Nick is trying to get in the meeting. I'm going to send him another link.
Okay, I think so. We do have a quorum, correct?
Yes, we do.
Okay, so next up, approval of the minutes, which I'm sure everyone has thoroughly read. I'd look for a motion to approve.
I move to approve the minutes.
Second,
I'll second it.
thanks, Maria. Anybody have any questions, comments, additions, or changes? So Lisa, do you want to do it? Are we doing a poll for this, or do you got to do this verbally again?
Yes, we do. You know what, for the minutes, as long as they're approved by the group, we're good. But on the other items that have motions, we do need to take an actual vote.
Okay, so all in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
All right.
I just wasn't there, so I'm not going to vote.
Okay,
Okay.
good work. I think we're all getting Zoom fatigued.
Yes.
Uh,
Can we hang tight for just 1 sec? Nick is trying to join and his Zoom link isn't working.
okay,
So I'm the only one on this back side. So hang tight just 1 second. I'll let you know when I get him his
Sure.
link. Thank you. All right, I've sent him the link again, so hopefully that one will work. Thank you for your patience.
all right, so next up, we've got public comment. Do we have any public comment that's not on the agenda? Do we have any public here? All right, I see none, so we can move on. And then I believe financials, we don't have financials. They'll come out after budget approval. Because Lee is feverishly working on everything that keeps getting changed and changed again and changed again. And so move on to project updates, fire. And I don't think we have any here, and no changes since last meeting, so no updates. Is that correct, Lisa?
That's correct.
Okay. And next up would be Public Works. So looks like Jer is here. and we'll let him take over.
Everybody, Jeremy Keene, Public Works Director. I'll just kick off a little bit and I'm going to hand off to Aaron Wilson. He'll give us a little bit more detail on one project in particular. So I'm trying to find my way back to the agenda. And that'll be our new request. So that's later in the agenda. I won't get into that first. So we've provided a document attached with just updates on all the ongoing projects that are being funded with impact fees. And I don't really intend to go through all of those other than to say we, in our FY23 budget, had to make a lot of adjustments because of cost inflation. And that hasn't resulted in any new requests from IFAC, but certainly all of those projects are seeing cost increases. We are moving forward with a construction project on Eaton, which is partially funded with impact fees. So that's going to reconstruct that street between 7th and almost to 14th. And then we have a second phase of that project that goes from 14th down to South Avenue that will continue to work on engineering, but it's probably a couple of years out on actual construction. And our next priority is to work on Turner Warden, and we're hoping to have that under construction next year. So we're getting it ready to bid this fall, winter, and have construction going next year with that one. South Avenue is also a project that has previously been approved by Impact Fee Committee with some pretty significant funding, and we're looking at phasing that project into some more manageable bites. So that's one of the ones that's, when you look at the impact fee ledger, you know, it's showing a lot of expense, but we'll be able to manage the fund balance by splitting that project up and doing it in phases. We really think the most important piece is from Reserve to, I think it's Old Fort Road. It's just before you get to the hospital. So that's the piece where we've seen some recent accidents, including a fatality, and also it just has a lot of different things going on with congestion as you approach the intersection, and really need for sidewalks and things like that. So any other questions about any of the projects that are on that list?
I have no questions, but I really appreciate the update, the sheet. It's concise and super helpful. I don't know if you prepared that, Jer, but
Nope, that is done by my staff, and they do appreciate the work that goes into that.
yeah, sure.
I will add one more update, which is number 9 on that list is Cemetery Rogers Road. And I can't remember if we've talked about this one before, but we did some preliminary work on that, some engineering feasibility, and came to the conclusion that that's really not feasible to make improvements because of the right-of-way widths. It's that road that's sandwiched between the cemetery and the railroad, and it's very narrow and hard to fit everything into that corridor. So right now what we're doing is we're exploring some other options, and we'll have a request in the future probably to reallocate that funding to a different project that we think is more feasible. So stay tuned for that.
Great. Any other questions, comments? I see none. Ryan, Parks update.
Hi. Thanks so much. Let's see. On our parks updates, I included past projects that have been approved for impact fee use and are in an active state right now of some sort. The first is the Spur and Klaus Trailhead. This was approved a little while ago, and I think $32,000 of impact fees is being used this year, likely in conjunction with the county, to pave the parking lot at the trailhead and do some redesign at the trailhead of the Bar Mile and Lower Patty Canyon. So that is likely to go on in conjunction of design and in conjunction with the county for design and paving of that trail. Redfern Park, we're getting ready to put to bid for a first phase of improvements for the playground. We have a generous donation from the HOA out there, and together with impact fees to get that playground going. And our landscape architects are working on that, and we hope to have that constructed in fiscal year 23. Waterworks Hill is under construction right now. I think substantial completion is for the end of July. We've been working, I know Public Works and park staff have been working out there a lot. And we're really excited for that project. And then our sports courts, we did go out to bid on those and received no bids for those 11 capacity increase and also kind of maintenance of those sport courts, cyclical maintenance of them. So we are putting our heads together and figuring out a way to repackage that in a way to get those projects done. So those are the updates that are active right now in impact fees. And any questions or updates or need for more information?
Thanks, Ryan. I see none. And moving on to new funding requests, I think you're up again for downtown Lions.
Yeah. Great. Thank you. Yeah, this is a funding request I think we held over from our last meeting, and was asked to kind of just specifically look at new pieces of equipment that are needed for this project as applies to use of impact fees. And so I think as part of the application, worked with Nathan McLeod, our lead landscape architect, to get preliminary cost estimates, the very preliminary, about 10% design development estimates of the work to get to a kind of build out per master planning at downtown Lions Park. And those are attached to the bids. And then, I think just the park build out itself is around $950,000 estimated right now. And we're working with multiple partners to activate this. And I think since our last meeting as well, the Flynn Lowney ditch is now under ownership of the city. And there's some exciting potentials working with MRA and Public Works about activating and expanding Ron's River Trail that goes through the downlines from California Street, actually all the way to the trestle that MRA is working on to potentially cross a pedestrian crossing at the river at the trestle by Imagination, or past Imagine by Fresh Market there. So this, we removed kind of the trail portions of this and kind of that area project from the parks one, focused this impact fee and our collaborations with the different groups on building out the park. And yeah, this impact fee request currently is for $150,000 to plan this into getting it into a more developed plan state and move forward with features at downtown Lions Park. Or questions or clarification?
Oh, Ryan, where's the other money coming from? Like the $800,000. Where will that be coming from?
We typically build out parks in a phased approach as money is available. Kind of similar to Redfern right now, getting the playground in is phase one of a multi-phase park to get to a complete park. So the other, to get to full build out, it'll probably multiple funding sources over many years. MRA has committed about 140,000 to this out of Erd District to help activate this area and help build out features in the park. And so we think with the 150 from impact fees plus that 140, we can likely get to a first amenity build out or a phase one build out. Probably would be a playground in that area and work towards getting more funding as we develop partnerships with the county and other entities. So yeah, that will likely be the scenario, and it's how a lot of our projects, especially in our neighborhood parks, develop.
I'm just curious how the downtown Lions Park is getting all this attention, because the park is really a pocket park in a very there's not a lot of people that live around there. And to put $1 million into a small plot of land where most of the people who do live there generally don't leave their apartments. I just am really, it's hard for me to wrap my head around $1 million going into that plot of land.
There a question, it is in one of our lowest income, most diverse neighborhoods. There is a youth homes directly to the north of the park and several housings, different types of housing accommodations right around the park, and it is in an underserved area. So I guess I would say that as an answer to the comments you're making.
I think we also, and Ryan, you might be able to speak a little more to this too. I think we talked about this last meeting, and part of it's a very underutilized park due to some safety issues, and isn't part of that development plan to mitigate some of those. And I don't know, Hank, maybe that'll actually spur some more use from those residents. But I think right now it's not an attractive place for anybody to be.
Yeah. When I ride my bike by, I see, our homeless neighbors hanging out in the morning, drying out, getting together, having a smoke. So those are the people that I see using the park right now. And putting $1 million into it, you're not going to get 10 kids there playing, because I don't think there's 10 kids that live over there.
Do you see this park mitigating the safety issues that are there? Because I would be concerned if kids wouldn't play just because they continue to be there. Safety issues.
I think activating the park and providing opportunities for our community to recreate and is a positive thing to do. I think this area is in a very underserved park standards wise, and is an area that we could provide opportunity for folks. So
I would disagree that it's an underserved area. I mean, you go across the California Street Bridge and you have a huge park. You have, hundreds of acres of parkland.
Maybe Jeremy, you can answer this. Didn't the community just engage a lot of members of this community to look at the area between the river and Broadway west of Russell Street? And isn't this park in that same area? And I think that was just done in the last year, unless I'm mistaken.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. I was just going to comment that we did just complete the Envision West Broadway Master Plan, which imagines several hundred units of new housing and also that improving that riverfront park space. So this Lions Park project is really a part of a larger project to extend that riverfront green space and trail system. So we heard a lot from the neighborhood about access to park space along the river, and also well, just even today we see, my office is over here on West Broadway, so I see kids crossing Broadway to go down to the parks all the time. There's a daycare, and a whole little string of ducklings goes across the street to get down to the parks. The other project is related to the Flynn Lowney ditch. There's a opportunity to do river restoration and enhance the access and use of the West Broadway Island. So this whole area is transitioning, and so it's a long vision, but this is one step in that to create that public open space, the amenity that you need if you're going to do higher density housing, and to encourage higher density housing to have those open spaces that are publicly available. So that's just the planning that's going on West Broadway.
It is kind of neat to look at that context map too. Thanks for that, because it does show essentially then they could really draw those two parks together on the north and south side of the river, especially as the development continues to happen, instead of just pass right through California Street Bridge and go south.
Sure, I think there is some exciting opportunity in this area.
So do we have a motion on this? Somebody want to make a motion? Lee, did you have your hand up for anything in particular? Or, okay, sorry, I didn't see that.
I just raised it at the same time you were asking for a motion. I wanted to let folks know that this was part of the FY22 budget process and was approved by City Council at that time, in case there was any concern there. Thank you.
John, this is Nick. I'd make a motion to approve the project.
Thanks, Nick. Do we have a second?
It's Peter. I'll second it.
Peter, second. So any further discussion on this motion? Oh, go ahead, Dwight. Sorry, I didn't see.
Thank you. I was on mute. Just for clarification, the $150,000, what exactly will this be funding? I mean, I see the full slate, and Ryan, I think you kind of talked about some of the various, but is this just basically the design? What are we actually funding?
I think we have in our CIP for 23, 75,000 for some more planning effort in fiscal year 23, and then moving towards full design and some construction in fiscal year 24 of a first kind of phase of the master build out. And again, that could take multiple years and to get to a multiple build out or a full build out of the master plan. But this would be funding initial or continuing design and planning efforts, and then the first phase of construction.
John, could I speak to the motion for just a moment?
Certainly.
So this community is planned to accommodate a majority of its future growth out on Mullen Road in the Sutup-Kane planning area. We have a trail along Mullen Road. Fortunately, it was done when the Montana Department of Transportation still allowed trails. Now you have to come up with liability and maintenance programs to get those trails. The only significant non-motorized path from Sutup-Kane into the downtown proper is along the Mullen Road Trail, and then take your life in your hands along West Broadway between Flynn Lane to across Russell Street to where you get to this trail. And then it's easy street on this trail across the California Street Bridge and all the way down to where Missoula College is, utilizing either the Madison Street Bridge or the Van Buren Street footbridge. With the community investment in the closure of the Flynn Lowney ditch, which runs right through this corridor and can be filled and added to the amenity of the trail and the riverfront park system, I think that being fair to the future residents of this community that we plan for, this important link and connection in this park as part of that is vital to the connection of our new residents west of town to the downtown. Thank you.
Thanks, Nick. Do we have any other comment? Am I missing anyone?
John, if I'd speak very briefly, and it just maybe touches on what Jeremy said earlier in terms of the West Broadway master planning effort. And I think that anytime something like this park it's coherent with a well thought out public investment that relates to that public engagement campaign, that master planning campaign. And this is a critical piece of that. I don't know if critical, but certainly an enhancement that helps to meet the broader goals of that area, then I feel good about that public investment. It's not just a off the cuff thing, but hundreds of people were involved through a concerted effort there.
Yeah, no, I would agree. And you know, Hank, I have the same concerns, but I also feel like as well that this could be a little bit of a catalyst in that area, and hopefully, you know, it does become a little bit more of an attractive spot for residents. Yeah, I don't know. Any other comments, or we want to vote on this?
Well, I just see it as really good intentions misapplied. And I see it as putting the cart before the horse. I mean, there aren't going to be hundreds more units down there for 20 years. By then, these park amenities will be kind of beyond their useful life.
So John, could I speak to that?
Yeah.
So this is the impact fee committee, right? And what we're talking about is the use of impact fees that are exacted from new development as they come online in the city of Missoula. And so that preponderance of new residents is not happening right now in this area, but it's planned for it from what Peter just talked about. But the funding for this is happening from new development out in the Mullen Road area and planned development. It's been happening out there since 2002. And so if that community is to connect to the heart of our community, which is the downtown, we need non-motorized trails, and we need places along those trails where those folks can recreate. Because if you looked at the price of gas, right, the opportunity for class 1 motorized bicycles and scooters and other items, right, is becoming an increasing trend towards non-motorized transportation, fossil fuel transportation in this community. So as a member of the impact fee committee, right, and the source of those impact fees, I still support this and reinforce the motion. Call for the question.
Okay, so yeah, I guess we've got a call for the question to vote. So all in favor of ending discussion, we have to do that in this meeting. I get so confused in Robert's rule, but I think we have to quickly vote on Nick's motion, end debate. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, now we can vote on the request. So I guess going back, we're looking to approve $150,000 of impact fee for the Downtown Lions plan. All in favor? And Lisa, do you need to do roll call vote for this?
Yes, please.
Okay.
All right, so we have Maria Chestnut,
Yes.
Dwight Easton,
Yes.
John Freer,
Yes.
Peter Walker Kelleher,
Yes.
Hank Trotter,
No,
and Nick Kaufman.
Yes.
All right, so that's 5 yeses and 1 no.
Thanks, Ryan. Up next, we've got the Scott Street improvements.
Yeah, thanks. I guess I will jump in here and do a quick presentation on what this request is and the project that we're hoping to fund with impact fees. I've got a quick slideshow that I can share just to get us all oriented to the project. So let me pull that up. All right, are you seeing the slideshow for Scott Street improvements?
Yes.
Perfect. All right. So this is a new CIP project that we are developing for Scott Street. It is, let me see. Go. All right, it is a project that's in primarily on the north side. So just so we're all familiar, I think everyone knows where Scott Street is. It would encompass essentially Scott Street from Phillips or just on the south side of the bridge through the north side to the end of Scott Street, essentially around the Bellagio apartments that are being constructed right now. One of the reasons we're bringing this forward, and I'll give some more detail to this, but there is a lot of growth, as you know, happening in the north side. There's the Bellagio apartments. There's a lot of vacant land that is ripe for redevelopment. There's the Rivara project that has been going through planning and permitting and is a public-private partnership. So there's a lot of activity in this area and a lot of potential impacts from on the transportation system from all of that existing and planned future development. So in anticipating trying to get ahead of that, we have the North Reserve Scott Street master plan envisions sort of a renewed or new roadway network in this area. Part of that are improvements planned for or identified for Scott Street, including multimodal facilities to expand capacity along Scott Street, but also intersection improvements to help facilitate the flow of traffic. And so this project is really building on the master plan and taking that existing Scott Street piece and looking to figure out what sorts of do the design and construction for improvements that are necessary to accommodate all of that growth. So a lot of growth happening. We've got a master plan that gives us some direction of what we think we want to do and the types of improvements, but we need to really nail that down and get ahead of some of this growth before it becomes too much of an impact that we stop being able to have a functional transportation system. Just as a context, an example of some of the development that we're seeing. This is an early rendering of the Rivara project. This is on some city and old brownfield property. You can see the existing development that's happened kind of on the north end of Scott Street, where Rogers comes into and intersects with Scott Street. So that's existing development, and it's quite a bit of new housing and mixed use going in this location, plus all of the planned development sort of north and west of that that is anticipated for residential or mixed use. So a lot of activity happening and putting additional strain on Scott Street and the facilities that are there today. So in with the Rivara group, there was WGM group did some traffic analysis to look at both existing conditions on Scott Street and on a number of intersections, and looking at what happens as we start to see build out of both the Rivara development and other developments to the north. And you can see as that development starts to build out at anticipated densities at 50% or 75 or 100%, a lot of those intersections with Scott Street start to fail if traffic volumes increase in the way that the traffic impact study projected. So there's a lot of impacts. We've got not just the Rivara development, but Bellagio is under construction. We anticipate that opening in the next year or so. Mountain Line is looking at relocating over to this area. and a number of other multifamily and higher density residential developments. So we expect to see a lot of these impacts start to materialize over the next couple of years, and using impact fees to try to get ahead of that and come up with a design and try to mitigate the impacts at some of these intersections. And also that traffic impact study shows that given our existing transportation facilities that we have today, and without some of the connectivity like the new interstate interchange or bridge over the railroad, which are really expensive and unlikely to happen in the very near future, most of the traffic is occurring on Scott Street. So people are coming from the west side and coming up Scott Street to access both Rivara and likely all of that new development that's going to occur there. So a lot of impacts coming to Scott Street, both from existing development and future. So what we want to look at in this project is looking at intersection impacts, particularly at the Phillips Scott Street intersection. Just going back to that analysis, you can see that the Phillips Scott intersection is already essentially failing today. So there are already issues at that intersection, presents a safety challenge and capacity to just move vehicles through there. It only gets worse as we see more development. But we also want to look at some of the other intersections, such as Turner. What are the improvements that we need to put there as that collector gets extended to the west and through per the master plan, and then other local street intersections to make sure that we have sufficient capacity and flow of vehicles and multimodal transportation. So currently we have some multimodal transportation facilities on Scott Street, but they probably don't meet the needs of a collector that's going to see the kinds of trip volumes that we expect on Scott Street. So we want to plan for making sure we have the right capacity for multimodal transportation and transit, and that we're planning for these new street intersections that happen as these developments occur along Scott Street. So a lot to look at and a lot to plan and accommodate as we see a lot of explosive growth in this part of Missoula. So looking at the funding, we're projecting it's going to be a mix of impact fees, new development, mitigation, and TIF funding from the Missoula Redevelopment Agency. We are requesting essentially $1.8 million in transportation impact fees over the lifespan of this project. That is what we're looking at doing, is taking what is already allocated for Cemetery Road, which that project, there's just a lot of feasibility issues, and we're not able to move forward with that project today, using the impact fees that are allocated for that project and reallocating them to Scott Street. And what we're hoping to, I think, request today is at least get approval for the first $120,000 for FY23. To start the design and engineering and getting that project up and running so that we know exactly what it is we need to construct and what the costs are. So this is sort of our rough estimate for this area and the funding that we anticipate being put towards Scott Street and some of the other adjacent projects. And so impact fees are just a part of that overall funding picture. So I think that's all I have on the presentation. I will stop sharing, and if there's questions, I can bring back up those maps or graphics. And Jeremy, if you have anything to add that I missed there, feel free to jump in.
That was great, Aaron. Thank you. I just wanted to add that I think that some of that future funding that we're saying is part of this Scott Street project, it could be part of a connected project. What we wanted to do is make sure that funding stays with this North Reserve Scott Street area, because we know we've got a bunch of transportation needs, and that as we flesh out the timing of those improvements and which ones are feasible, we want to make sure that there's still some funding that's dedicated to that area. So the request today is really just to do the engineering on Scott Street. I don't know that Scott Street is a $1.8 million project, and so I don't want you to be kind of blown out of the water by that cost. That was just the amount of money that we had dedicated for Cemetery Road, and so we wanted to keep that as a placeholder.
Thanks, Jared. Thanks, Aaron. And I appreciate the multi-year forecast that it puts the request a little bit more in context. I know sometimes we see requests that are attached to projects and we have no idea what the end game is going to look like. And so it's nice to have that. A couple of questions I have, and so this is just for the request speaks of multiple roadway improvements. So is there anything in here for non-motorized, or is that still in the design with what this request will help fund? And then a sidebar question, I think on one of those slides, it said future interchange. Was I looking at that correctly?
Yeah, that's not related to this project, but it is part of the master plan for the North Reserve Scott Street area and is likely part of the way that we mitigate the growth in this, in the north side in general. Having a new interchange that connects people to the interstate and from there, to other destinations. For this specific project, it's more of a, you're right, it is a multimodal project. So we do want to look at making all of the right sidewalk connections, appropriate bike facilities, designing intersection improvements to facilitate safe multimodal transportation. So as you start to see a lot of traffic, potentially even looking at the Scott Street Bridge and looking at if there are opportunities, we can't change the grade of the bridge and some of those structural elements, but maybe we can take what's there in terms of multimodal space and do something better with what space we have available. So.
Yeah, that was really, I think, the meat of my question, because even now the level of traffic that's going over that bridge, and it's you take your life in your hands when you get on there on your bike or if you're walking. And so hopefully that'll be part of that design process.
Yep. Yeah, I think anything we design will have theoretically appropriate multimodal facilities.
I have a question just in regards to our process. It looks like we're now kind of in this new criteria checklist, because we used to debate, percent eligibility for, significant periods of time. And I'm not necessarily seeing that as a determining factor anymore. Am I missing that, or where does that play into our discussion? I'm not questioning it in this particular instance. I'm kind of, John, this might be more of a question for you or the city. Just where is that in our discussion anymore?
I think it's supposed to be in the on the criteria sheet number 2, determine proportionate share. Which there's not, I don't think there's anything underneath that currently in this proposal, but I think that we've had the same issue with a lot of the transportation ones where we don't know the cost. And so, yeah, and I think you're looking at about a third of the cost. But I think it is supposed to be in that category number 2. But Aaron, you've got in there just expansion of existing public facility. Yes, but I guess, Maria, what you're asking for is some sort of data, or at least whether it's quantifiable or anecdotal in that calculation.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a precedent of this committee to have that information for a long time. So it would seem that we would need to have it on all projects as status quo.
Yeah, that's a good question. This form is a little bit new to me, so I'm not as, and maybe Allison, not to put Allison on the spot, but I don't know if we've done that on previous, or how we've done that on previous. I guess what I would say is that we do have other fund, we're anticipating a substantial contribution from tax increment financing to some degree for improvements in this general area. How much of that goes to Scott Street or any given surface transportation project, I don't know that we know that yet, because we don't know the full costs, because we don't have a final design yet. And so we're still in the fairly early stages of this project and what is actually going to be constructed and how that expands capacity. I think the other thing I would say is that the reason we're doing these improvement projects is to facilitate expanded capacity, that if there wasn't additional growth in traffic and development, that we would be unlikely to have, that this project probably wouldn't rise to the top in the way that it is now because of the development. And so the need to do this project is almost entirely because of the development and the transportation impacts of that development, if that makes sense.
It makes complete sense. I think that your project should be going through. I'm just making sure that we're still following the process that I feel like has been set out from the impact fee committee, that we need to have essentially the calculation data in place for the eligibility.
I'll defer to somebody who has more knowledge of that form, I guess.
This is Allison. This is the
help?
first project that we presented using the new form. So if we've done it incorrectly, we can make adjustments to that.
I'm not really certain where in the form it's asking for it, but it's not. I mean, this is maybe more of a form question. I see several hands up, but so I kind of wanted, since we're all assembled, I don't want this to continue being a question next time or next project. So it says like create the calculation, but doesn't necessarily leave space for it. What's the expectation?
No, I think Maria, you're right on it. There's nothing under the 2B section where it says calculation. It requests to show the allocations of expanded capacity to total project cost. I do know in the past for a lot of our transportation projects, it is difficult to put that cost on there without knowing the final cost of the project. And historically, I don't think that staff has requested more than 33% of any of those large transportation projects until they know cost. But to your point, there should be something there on the form. Yeah.
Yeah, sounds like Ryan and Jeremy might both have questions, comments.
Okay, if I go.
No, yeah, go ahead, George. Sorry. But you should take
You
yourself
went back
off.
on mute. Sorry, Jeremy.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you. Sorry. I think that, part of the reason the form was simplified was because the just exactly what John said, the calculations around how much and what percentage of capacity we're increasing aren't often known at the beginning of a project. And even as the project is developed, can be a little bit nebulous to calculate. And so I think the test for whether it's eligible is probably more narrative than calculated. And as Aaron described, you can really make the connection on this particular project between development that's happening and impacts to the transportation system that it's causing. So we could try to go back to more of a formula base, but if this committee wants that, but I'm not sure that we're really giving you very accurate information because it's really based on a lot of assumptions.
I'm actually not disagreeing with that at all, Jeremy. I more want the group to acknowledge this shift and move together acknowledging that, or not.
Yeah, Maria, I don't think it's a shift away from requiring that. I think really what it needs is just under 2B, a reference to the anticipated budget. And that would probably satisfy what the calculation is, showing impact fees at whatever that is, 30% of total project cost.
Without necessarily proving that it's 30% eligible, but that's the percentage that they're requesting.
Yeah, so that that gives us some sort of substantiated numbers to look at the request. And again, we're not, I don't want to get back into that trap where we start debating each one and trying to put exact numbers on there. I do agree there needs to be something there. Well, it really is. It's up in the, I'm got too many screens open. Really the spreadsheet that shows the funding sources for the anticipated cost, I think if that were referenced as the capacity increase or or the justification capacity increase, it would check that box. But
So just, I think in some ways, and maybe I'm incorrect on this, Ryan and Jeremy, is like, I feel like we owe it to you and Aaron as the city and Ross as the city to say, hey, this is what we're expecting, because it's felt a little bit nebulous over time, and like what our, because we have debated these increases in percentages and who is, and what percentage, are they eligible for, and kind of ran down roads for quite a long periods of time. And so basically, John, what I'm hearing you say is they don't need to necessarily prove eligibility anymore. They just need to say, kind of back calculate the percentage they're expecting. So in this case, it would be 1.8 million over 5.55 million, and that would be the percentage.
no, I would not say at all that they don't need to prove eligibility. They certainly do. I think it's, and this is the one we always run into at the transportation ones, especially for projects that they haven't even put in the design phase yet, not requiring them to do, even though they've actually done some traffic study work here. But I think in the past, what we've requested was until they have final design and final costs, they at least have to, because it's really difficult for them to show the exact nexus and proportionality of what's attributed to, what are deficient conditions, what's attributable to new growth. And
Yeah,
so,
I think in this one, it could be so simple for them to do with the traffic counts, though. I mean, the traffic counts Aaron presented, I mean, that's kind of what we would have based all of our calculations on before. Here's where they're at, and here's where we're gonna be. And then that's, would prove a significant level versus what they're actually asking for. It seems like we should just make sure the lines are followed all the way through. So John, when you're saying you want them to go back and prove that capacity increase, because really capacity increase can be separated from dollar value. I mean, those are really two different calculations. What would you have wanted in this case? Was there anything missing in this case for you?
I think from my perspective is just referencing, there needs to be something in 2B that references what they're substantiating. But again, I don't think this is a unique case because they already do have the traffic counts in but the lion's share of all of some of the newer requests don't have that background information already. So certainly, I think if that was in there, it would probably be a lot clearer to what the capacity increase is. But I still, if we're looking at the total estimated cost and the impact fee allotment to it at roughly 30%, I don't think I'd have a problem supporting it, at least for this initial design request, until they could get final numbers on it. Does that make sense? Ryan, Ryan's got his hand up. I didn't see that. Sorry. Go ahead, Ryan.
I just thought I could provide a little context. I worked to update this form quite extensively when we did the impact fee update. And I do think the intent, and if we go down to appendix in number 4, it kind of provides some guidance on those, if it is not total new development, and how we calculate capacity in a transportation context. And I don't know if that's the only one. It was what we tried to kind of reduce that a little bit, but it does talk about traffic generation based on a specific source, or widening a commuter trail, or adding a turn lane, increasing capacity. So those were the things that were contemplated, and I think it is, and there's some park examples as well, to, if it's not a new facility, how do we assign an appropriate percentage? So I just wanted to provide that context as someone who worked on this form.
And just a question, because I noticed on the parks one, we had new facility for that park, and so it was 100% eligible. But do we have to prove that there's growth to require that new facility?
The impact fee, except for the special district that I know of in the Septupquane area, is based on incremental expansion and is a one area. It's not on, so it is impact fees that come in, and that incremental expansion is based on a level of service. And so I think the assumption is if we're adding level of service, then it is related to capacity. I think that's where kind of our consultants were talking to us, and you know, if that's a sufficient answer, but that's the comment that I guess I would have.
I guess my only comment would just be, you know, in the future to make sure that the form is followed all the way through with, you know, following that appendix piece.
Yeah, I agree, Maria. I think it's a good point, and there should be something there in that section B under the determining proportionate share. I think it at least at this level, approving the fees for the design phase will lead to them, if we're going to require a little bit more detail as far as proof of capacity, once they have the design, then they'll have an understanding of what they've added, what they've increased. And that'll give us, I think it's probably a lot of excessive work right now to prove capacity. And I think that's where we had lots and lots of debate on these initial design stage approvals, especially for transportation, because it's hard to prove that capacity at this point until they know what the design is, and really if they're going to add lanes and bike lanes and what that will actually do to the traffic count and capacity. Peter, you have a.
Yeah, John, if we're ready to move on, I just had a couple questions for Aaron, if that's okay, not related to that particular topic. Aaron, on your front funding plan, just curious to what extent MRA is on board with the approximate levels of funding, and two is, can you clarify what is meant by new development?
Yeah, so if I recall correctly on that spreadsheet, MRA is on board at funding some level of, and Jeremy, maybe you have a better idea of what they've actually committed to. I don't know that they've actually committed to this area, but they have been discussing projects like the Mountain Line facility expansion, support for Rivara for some of the intersecting streets. So they've been considering this, and it is a priority for the district. So I could say that, I think, confidently without stepping on MRA's toes too much. And then new development, I think we'd expect, so that is just a rough estimate of, you know, as new development comes and they have direct impacts and they are contributing to some of these improvements because they are directly impacting, say, an intersection or, you know, a part of Scott Street, that would be a contribution from those developments to the project, I believe is where those numbers came from. And again, at this point, it's kind of a rough estimate because we don't really know exactly what's going to happen on development other than what we've seen so far. And we don't know to what extent they'll be responsible for portions of these improvements or what those improvements are specifically. So I think at this point, it's a pretty rough estimate of a budget. And I would almost guarantee that it's going to change before we get to construction.
Thank you.
So John, this is Nick. Thank you, Maria, for bringing it up, and thank you, John, for helping inform it, and to you, Ryan, for talking about the appendix. So I would not like to hold this one up to amend the forum, but I would like to have further discussion with the impact fee committee relative to the forum. I mean, John, you reached out to members of the impact fee committee. The city had a pretty broad base of support when we updated the impact fees, but it seems like there's something that may have slipped through the cracks. But I don't want to retroactively penalize a project because we might have missed something when we did that work. So if we can go back and revisit that, that'd be great. But I'd like to see this one move forward. And just so you know, I'll be declaring a potential for a conflict of interest on this one. I think you saw Rivara, who we're working for, and WGM Group in the traffic study before, but I would like to speak to this further as we move hopefully towards a motion. Thank you.
Thanks, Nick. Jared?
Thank you. I'll just say quickly, we'll take this feedback and include this in future applications, because I think we may have missed what the intent of the new form was a little bit here, and we can certainly try to do a better job of showing that proportionality. I think in this case, because we don't really know the project yet, it would be hard for us to make a very accurate assessment of what proportion is new capacity versus other things. So I think if it's possible for us to move forward with that preliminary engineering phase, that'll give us that information. And as we get into those future years of funding, we can give you a much better calculation of the proportionality between impact fees and MRA funding and that direct developer funding.
Yeah, thanks, Jared, and Nick too, and back to Maria. I think we do just need to clarify a little bit on what, where it says add the justification, just what that looks like. In this case, I think even a narrative describing where the project was and that the intent is not to exceed 30% of impact fees until quantifiable capacity increase can be identified. I think that would be suitable, but maybe we'll talk about this at another point. Do we have a motion? Somebody want to make a motion for this one?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Do we have a second?
John, I can second that.
Thanks, Peter. So do we have any other additional discussion on this motion? We're going to approve $120,000 of impact fees for design phase, the Scott Street improvements.
So I'd like to speak to it for a moment. And so what I love about the Missoula community is we plan, and then we implement, and we fund our implementation. And in this case, the improvements to Scott Street come from a long list of plans. I think there's 3 or 4 iterations of the North Side, West Side development plan. There's the 2015 R Missoula comprehensive plan. I think, Jeremy, the correct date for the North Reserve Scott Street is circa 2018. And then that was recently updated as your transportation department and Stephen McDaniel at WGM Group looked at the transportation study to sort of fill in the gaps in the area that we're talking about. It's also a blighted area. It's in a TIF district of MRA. It's also in an opportunity zone, right? So this is an area where we plan for development for the growth of our community for years. And now we're seeing that envisioned in both sustainable housing with Bellagio, the market rate housing that David Edgell did at Scott Street Villages, the project that's under review right now for Rivara. Very few communities get ahead of growth with infrastructure. The city of Missoula is doing it on Mullen Road with the build programs in advance of the build out of Sutup Cane, which is just a recent result of a less than 2-year-old planning effort. So I think what we're looking at today is having new development partially fund the initial steps of design, which lead to future steps of construction. So while I won't be able to vote for this, I strongly support the proposal brought forth by Aaron and Jeremy.
Thanks, Nick. Jeremy, did you have your hand up again, or your hand is still up?
Nick, just to be clear, when you said you will not be able to vote, does that mean you are required to abstain?
I don't know if you addressed that to me, Maria, but I'm having a hard time understanding you clearly. I don't know if it's on your end or mine. I understand everybody else, but if you could have someone else repeat your question, if it was directed to me, I'll try to answer.
Yeah, I just put the microphone closer. Maybe that'll help. My question was just, when you said you won't be able to vote, does that mean you just need to abstain via conflict of interest?
You know, typically that's what we do. I'll abstain from voting. for the
Okay,
Potential.
I just wanted
Potential
to
of a
be
conflict.
clear that that's what you meant when you said that.
Yep, thank you.
Have any other questions or comments on the motion? I see none. Lisa, will you do the roll, please?
I sure will. Just one question. The way that the motion was set up was that the group was approving funding, a funding request in the amount of $1,800,000 for Scott Street improvements. Did you want to update the motion to reflect an amount of $120,000 of impact fees? Is that what I heard? Did I hear that correctly?
That wasn't the intention behind the motion that I had set, but I would also leave that open to Aaron if that is what they're requesting at this point.
Yeah, and I might need some assistance from Jeremy or Allison in terms of how that motion was set. My understanding, we need that 120,000 would be sort of the necessary amount to get started in FY23 on this project. And then if that was the limit, now we would come back for additional requests. Essentially what we want to do is try to keep those, as Jeremy said, keep the funding that was allocated to Cemetery Road in this area, whether it's part of the Scott Street project or as part of some other broader project. But essentially we want to keep those funds in this area for future improvements. And so that would be the goal, the long-term goal. Jeremy, I don't know if you have thoughts on whether we need the full 1.8 million approved now or not.
If they did approve the 1.8 million, my question would just be, would that ensure allocation to this area?
Yeah, it would.
Yeah, I'm not sure which way to go with this. So I believe that 1.8 million was approved previously for Cemetery Road. And I want to keep it on the ledger so that we have that placeholder so that we're not thinking we have money to spend somewhere else, that we keep it in this area because we're going to need it there. But because of the lack of detail around the project, it feels a little bit uncertain to approve the full amount. I don't know, Lee, if you can give us any guidance on what we should do there.
Well, so I was basing that off of the presentation that highlighted the 120,000, but I don't see an amount. I don't actually see an amount requested in the request. I see the budget, the draft budget that highlights the total estimated of 1.8 million. And so I don't know, Maria, if you want to amend your motion for just 120,000, or we want to vote on the 1.8. I know that we have in the past voted on these motions to approve the whole amount of the funding, not to exceed. So that if that 5.5 budget goes to 10.5, then they would have to come back with another request.
Lee, would you respond to?
I'm not sure I'm answering the question, but I just wanted to let folks know about the budget process. So with a multi-year capital improvement project, a CIP, it only gets approved, or the funding is only actually technically approved for 1 year at a time. So even if it's a multi-year project, we know it's going to be multi-year funding. We understand that that funding is often in flux and that prices change, which is why departments always have to bring that back to City Council each year. And that's also how we handle the ledger for the impact fees, because there's so many sort of moving targets in the air. So it just gets analyzed on an annual or more regular basis. But we do like to incorporate as much information as possible for the projections, for the multi-year projections. So if the impact fee, and my experience has been that this committee approves on a project basis.
So Maria, would you clarify what your motion was again?
Yeah, I mean, given that discussion, my motion would be to stay with the 1.8 million total that would, spread out over 5 years. That would essentially stick that to the that north side area. And then it sounds like we would be readdressing it, as needed based on the project timeline regardless. So that would be my continued motion.
Okay, and Peter, you had seconded that?
And I'm good with that. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, so did you want me to take the vote then on the 1.8 million for the Scott Street
I
improvement?
think Dwight's got a question.
Okay.
And make sure that now we have a clarity on the motion, that we have any more discussion on it. Go ahead, Dwight.
Thank you, John. So the question I have goes back to the Cemetery Road project. Does that mean that one is now gone? So I didn't ever hear what this committee had previously approved a project. And now, we're hearing that there are problems with it, but I never heard what is the actual resolution when something like that occurs. And I think it's when we're looking to add another $1.8 million, I'd like to see that resolved.
Yeah, and so Lee, did you have?
What we've done in the past, if someone's needed to withdraw a project, which has happened, we will remove it from the ledger. I don't know that we actually need to go through a formal motion process to do that. But if folks elect to do that, I think that would be fine as well for the record.
Dwight, did you have another?
Just a follow up then to Jeremy and staff. Would that be your recommendation, is to remove that one for the ledger?
That would. Our conclusion was that project wasn't feasible as we had originally thought about it. And so I don't think that one should stay on the ledger.
Maria, would you be willing for a friendly amendment?
Sure.
I would like to tack on the end that we would remove the Cemetery Road project as an amendment to this motion.
That's fine for me.
And fine for me.
Thank you, Peter.
So John, this is Nick. I didn't think it was possible to confuse me, but so would you clarify the motion that I'm not going to vote on by rereading it with the amendment, please?
I believe the amendment is to fund up to $1.8 million in transportation impact fees for the Scott Street Road improvement, and to remove the Cemetery Road project from the impact fee ledger. Any more questions? Lisa, you're up.
Okay. So I have the motion as approved funding request in the amount of $1,800,000 for Scott Street improvements and remove the Cemetery Road project from impact fee ledger. Is that correct? All right. So Bruce Bender.
I just joined the meeting, so I'll pass.
Saying okay. Maria.
Yes.
Dwight.
Yes.
John.
Yes.
Peter.
Yes.
Hank.
Yes.
And Nick abstaining?
Yes.
All right,
Oh, pass. I'm sorry.
or pass, or, okay, perfect.
I got caught up in the excitement of all the yes votes.
All right, so that's 5 yeses and 2 abstaining.
Thank you. I think we have no other funding requests. Do we have any other new business?
Yeah, I'm not sure how. I'm not very familiar with meetings or the rules of order or whatever. So I don't know if this is new business or something that I would like to be new business down the road. But I would like this committee to look at a rebate or refund of impact fees for first-time home buyers and income qualified buyers. Because as we know, affordable housing is getting harder to do all the time, and impact fees are a significant portion of construction costs. And I think it would be a good way for the city to recognize that and try to assist buyers who are really struggling to get into the housing market.
Yeah, I know we have precedent, Hank. We did this with the downtown area with the transportation impact fee. And so I think it would be definitely something that we can take up at the next meeting.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. I don't know how, I don't know where the city stands on that, or the council, but I think it definitely is as we've said from the start, every dollar that gets spent on the front prices somebody out of the market, and it's definitely getting tougher and tougher in Missoula right now.
I think it'd be a real interesting discussion. I think there'd be a lot of, thoughts on both sides of it. So I think it'd be a really worthwhile discussion.
For sure. I think, Lee, do you have your hand up again?
I do. I think this would need a legal read, since my understanding of the statute is that impact fees are to be spent on capital. Just want to throw that out there, that would be important for that discussion, and I can let our city attorney's office know that we are going to bring it up.
And I think, Bruce, you might have been involved when we did the, I think it was an amendment to the ordinance that we did for the downtown transportation impact fee. So.
Yeah, it has to be based upon an area, like the downtown area was specifically analyzed and studied. And so then that particular area had its own impact fee, similar to what you're just doing in the Mullen area. If you're going to assist a specific purchaser, which would be a hometown buyer, you have to bring funds from some other source because you can't create inequities in the impact fee itself system. As Lee kind of said, it's based upon the building being created. It doesn't look at who's buying it or who owns it or whatever. And so if you're ever going to get into assistance of first-time home buyers, it has to come from some other source. In other words, you'd have to have general fund pay the impact fees or something like that, which is a very feasible thing to consider. But you could not orchestrate it through impact fee structure itself.
I'm sorry, other people have their hands up.
White had his hand up, and then Nick.
Must have been an error on my part, so I'm sorry.
Nick, you had your hand up?
You're not on, Nick.
Thank you. We've had this conversation with our consultant before, and Hank, thank you for bringing it up again. So we need revenue, and new development needs to pay their fair share. The problem with impact fees is they are an upfront cost. They're a cost associated with the production function, and they go on the price of the home and the mortgage. So every person that has impact fees that are part of their mortgage, they pay about $1.30 with principal and interest, right, to pay the city $1, right, because they're financing that impact fee on a 30-year mortgage. if we really want the revenue from impact fees and the homeowner to pay $1 and the city get $1, right? Then you simply change how you assess impact fees from an upfront cost, that is the impact that Hank's talking about, to tacking it on to the tax bill through monthly connection fees for sewer or water, if you can't do it at the state level with property tax. And then suddenly the homeowner isn't paying it up front and paying a 30-year interest rate on that impact fee, right? They're paying it how they can afford it on a monthly basis or on a biannual basis or annual basis as a function of the collection of certain fees. Now, we've had a conversation with Dale Bickle about this. If you might have observed that the last legislative session for the state of Montana was a bit conservative, right? And concern for losing revenue, and also concern for the impact to new homeowners and housing is really important. So if this committee wanted to do something really innovative and was serious about doing it, right, there's an option, but I'm getting kind of tired of bringing it up.
Hank?
Well, yeah, I mean, this has been a concern of mine for a long time as a builder and developer, and a person interested in building affordable housing. And so I went to Montana Code annotated 2021, and it says right in there when it's talking about impact fees that, I'm quoting from it, this part does not prevent a governmental entity from granting refunds or credits. So anyway, there's a lot to discuss here. So maybe the next meeting or something like that, we can.
I think there is, and I think maybe
have
what
discussion.
would be important in getting staff involved and getting some of the council involved, and maybe Hank, I guess I'd ask to, maybe we can follow up outside of this meeting and talk a little bit about maybe some next steps.
Cool, that'd be great.
Because I think I hear Nick in saying too, we've talked about it a lot, and we either need to come up with a plan that the city can execute, or maybe give it up. But I'm happy to reach out outside of this, and we can talk about it.
As a member, I'd really appreciate that too, for us to come with, viable options instead of having a discussion about things we're not 100% certain about being options, or at least 90% certain.
Does anyone else have any other new business? I think I've got a couple things in other, and the first one is that Jerry Ford, who's a member of the committee, I had talked to him last week. Lisa had reached out, and he's no longer going to be able to be on the committee. So I think we need to look for another person if we've got some recruits. And my question on that really is a little bit of the composition. I don't think there was, when the committee was put together, I'm not sure that there was actually a makeup of the committee that specified. I think it was just mayoral appointees. And so are we missing any representation from any other stakeholder groups that should be on this committee? And then the little bit of a rhetorical question, and the other follow-up is if you have some recommendations of people that you feel might be willing to be involved, and we can certainly reach out and recruit. And Lisa, can we make sure Jerry is the he was on the original committee. He was one of the first members when it started, and so hopefully we'll reach out to him and thank him for his service. And
I have tried to reach out to Jerry, and I've never heard back from him. So maybe you have some contact information I don't, that I could pass along to the clerk's office.
I will. I'll share it with you.
Okay, thank you, John.
Yeah.
So, John, this is Nick. Given what Hank brought up and what we've discussed before in terms of impact fees. So from the development community, John, there's you, there's I, there's Dwight. Hank looking around. But really, to have an effective political voice and effective diversity on the committee, we need someone who's in the category that Hank just talked about. People that are looking for a new home, or people that recently were fortunate enough to purchase a new home. But I think that's where we're missing. It's so easy for us to exact taxes from the population that's not here yet, because they're not here. They're not a voice. But for the impact fee committee, have someone on it that is searching for a home or a provider of attainable homes in the community would be a great voice on this committee.
Yeah, I was actually, thanks, Nick, for bringing that up. I was thinking of talking about the same thing. How could we gain more diversity? Because I worry if we're just all going to people like ourselves, we're going to get someone just like, you know, an echoed voice. Maybe potentially someone who is on a, you know, a Homeward or another, you know, affordable housing type group, or, you know, how do we advertise for this?
I believe it's a mayoral appointment. I don't know if the prior, maybe the newest folks on the committee can speak to if it's been a collaboration between the mayor and the committee. But the process, whenever somebody is decided, will then have to go through the city council nomination process.
Yeah, there is a formal application that I think all of us have filled out at some point. But I think the challenge is finding, I agree, and that's why I posed the question, Nick. I think that we sometimes are a little heavy on the development side, and I don't, the question would be, can we get someone from the community that's interested in serving on this committee? And Lisa, I guess a question for you too. I don't know how we're recruiting for this, and if there is something that we can do beyond what we already do to recruit.
Well, you know, usually the way that it happens with the committees is, I know that there's appointments or they go through the clerk's office. And so let me touch bases with the clerk's office and see. I've never been involved in that side of things, but I can certainly see what information I can gather.
Yeah, thanks. That would be helpful. And then, oh, Peter.
Yeah, I'm wondering if there'd be value in some representation from law enforcement or fire. And I'm thinking of two individuals that I see at the Y, and they both retired from the fire department. I think they bring a different perspective, and I'm wondering if that would be of value. I know that that's two of the areas that we address through impact fees. But if appropriate, I'd be happy to reach out to those two people.
The only thing I worry about with that, Peter, is they'd be declaring a conflict of interest almost at every meeting. If impact fee funds are being, you know, how many have we seen from fire and police? And we've seen a lot.
These are folks that are retired. Do you still see a conflict there?
Oh, I get it. Thank you.
Yep.
Oh, I thought he was lobbying to get after Bruce here.
What? To replace me?
No. Great. So one other final comment that I had in circling back, Marie, on the form. I think one of the problems that I see just under that determine proportionate share, that item A, which is expansion of an existing public facility identified in the service area report and impact fee study. I think that's actually, I don't think that falls under determining proportionate share. I think that's an eligibility question. And so what might have been confusing is that question in the determine proportionate share probably needs to be as eligible. Is it eligible? Not to what degree is it eligible? Ryan, do you have?
Yeah, my thought on that is potentially as a just kind of the format of the form, if A is there in the 2A exists, determine proportionate share, and then B is actually kind of if yes, then under the calculation. Because if it's no, you go down to C as a new facility. And if you answer both to no, then it's probably not impact fee eligible. But if you answer yes to A, then there is some type of either narrative calculation if it's in a very beginning form, or some type of quantitative calculation if more information is known. Does that make sense on kind of changing the format to going A and then almost like a numeral 1, if yes, then calculate?
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think that would be perfect to add in there.
And I can work maybe with Lisa and to circulate that around internally, or I think if, I can see what everyone thinks internally as well on that. But that was one thought that it was, it's good to see folks that have not seen the form and been involved react to the form to see, oh, that's what we need to change.
Yeah, I think that would add the right flow to it. So, and that's a pretty easy fix. Any other comments, questions? I see no hands. Next meeting. Do we have a date yet, Lisa, or is that to be determined?
It's to be determined. We usually try for about once a quarter, so that would put us into, August, September-ish, if that works. Is there a month that's better for everybody?
I would say likely September, just because August tends to turn into a summer mess.
Yes, and also with the budget, I know that Lee is swamped at that time.
And
The budget is targeted to be approved by the end of August.
Okay. So how about if we shoot towards the end of September to give everybody time to regroup?
I think that sounds great.
Okay.
Last but not least, would anyone like to make a motion to adjourn? No one?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Maria. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
All right, great. Multiple seconds. Thanks, everybody. I appreciate it. And will we be meeting via Zoom in September, or are we going to move back towards face-to-face meetings or hybrid?
We're actually just in the process in the next couple of weeks working on making the meetings hybrid, so you can attend either in person or virtually. And so we will be moving to a different platform rather than everything being presented via Zoom. We will be working via Teams, and I'll be in touch with the committee once I have more details. That's about all I've been given at this point as far as information, but I'll certainly share it as we get a little bit closer.
Great. Thank you, Lisa. Oh, so all in favor of adjourn?
Aye.
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 All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks all.